We got more good news, more good Supreme Court news. Apparently, you're not allowed to use, not Supreme Court, federal judge. You're not allowed to use social media and coordinate with the federal government to censor people, which is something that a judge shouldn't have to step in and say in a free country. That's just something that shouldn't happen anyway. But since we live in a country that is no longer free, that is something that had to happen here. So salute to the federal judge. Let's talk to Jeffrey Tucker about it. Joining me now, founder, Brownstone Institute, Jeffrey Tucker. Okay, this is obviously a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's a very important decision. The whole thing reminds me of the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Those were passed by Congress about 11 years after the Constitution was ratified. And incredibly, they punished speech when it was critical of the government. And the country was so outraged that they swept Thomas Jefferson into office in 1800 as on the promise that he would repeal them, and he did. So, it seems like that was just the same generation as the Constitution was passed. We had to test the First Amendment. Here we are in the 21st century. We have new technologies. The new technology in question here is social media, which permits, the promise of social media was that it was going to permit everybody to have a voice. Well, once that voice started competing with mainstream media, media which works very closely to government at all times, that's always been true. The agricultural reporter at the New York Times is constantly in touch with the deep state bureaucrats at the Department of Agriculture and so on. What happened was that they tried to shut down social media. And that began in earnest, really, in 2020, where the deep state bureaucrats, and all these people are elected, there was no law passed, right? It was just, you can't say this, you can't say this. They started working very tightly with social media people. We have now hundreds, really thousands of documents. In fact, the Biden administration has bragged about it. Jen Psaki used to brag about it all the time. Biden himself threatened Facebook personally. You remember his comment that they have to shut up because they're killing people? Well, that turns out to be just the beginning. They've been doing this all along. Very close working relationship. So anytime the government saw a post they didn't like, they would write Twitter or LinkedIn. There are something like 12 different social media platforms in question here, and say, we got to get rid of this guy. You can't say that about masks. You can't say that about vaccines. Lockdowns were great. Don't discuss Hunter Biden's laptop, and so on it went. And this went on for the better part of 2 years and longer, really 3 years. Well, we finally found some plaintiffs in the case. They happen to be mostly associated with the Brownstone Institute, Martin Kulldorff, Jay Bhattacharya, Aaron Kheriaty. And it was litigated and complete with depositions from Fauci and so on. So finally, the judge has acted. And it's a very interesting action. He was so alarmed to see this that he realized, this is an imminent threat to American liberties and rights. So he issued an injunction. You have to stop this immediately. And along with that injunction, a 150-page documentation that is going to be very helpful to the Supreme Court when the case finally goes to the Supreme Court, which it certainly will.
Jeffrey, are we going to win that? That seems like a no-brainer win at the Supreme Court level. And I realize I'm asking you to predict the future here, but this is so grossly wrong and frankly illegal for the government to censor things, to coordinate and force these things on social media companies. This is obviously a no-brainer at the Supreme Court, right?
Well, one would hope so. I mean, this has never been tested before. I mean, can government go into social media companies and tell them what their policies have to be vis-a-vis their own user base, right? This has never really come up before. And so we need a good, clean decision on this. My read of what the judge said in his 150-page memorandum, which is quoting Orwell and Harry Truman and the Founding Fathers, it's really great, really well documented, beautifully put together. It seems to me that the Supreme Court can't rule any other way. I mean, we have plenty of established precedent that the government cannot censor by using third parties. It's one thing, as I say, for government to be in touch with regular reporters at the New York Times, but to go into social media companies and say you must tell you have to ban this user, you have to ban these thoughts. That's a direct violation of the First Amendment. And we have plenty of precedent that says the government cannot do that, yet they were doing it anyway, and they did it with impunity for a very long time. This is why the judge issued this injunction. This is an emergency. Now, so the next step is that I'm sure the injunction itself will be challenged, and the ruling on that will say, yes, the judge had the right to issue this injunction. So the injunction will be upheld, which creates a different law, essentially. It means that really starting now, it started yesterday, July 4th. Ha! Good timing. Government employees at CISA, FBI, NIH, CDC, the State Department, Justice Department, all these agencies listed, and the names of the people listed as defendants was particularly satisfying to me, cannot be in contact with social media on routine policies concerning what kind of content is labeled as misinformation or disinformation. That is now, enforcement is another matter, but right now that is no longer legal. So the injunction will likely be upheld, but then it will be appealed by the defendants. So it'll go to the next court and probably eventually the Supreme Court, but that Supreme Court decision could be year 2 or 3 away. But for now, the law of the land is that they cannot do that, and I'm guessing that injunction will be upheld. So this is a very big and important moment. Now, Jesse, there are a lot of people out there, regular people, who they're not even aware that this has been going on. They've had their accounts throttled, taken down, they've had their LinkedIn profiles destroyed, or they're just innocent readers of Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook and don't know that the whole thing is being curated by government officials and their algorithms, or outsourced to a third party like the fact checkers. In other words, they haven't known that the information that they've been getting from independent social media companies is actually government propaganda. They haven't known this. Well, now they probably know it because this case has received a tremendous amount of attention. And it's going to change the way that people think about social media. They're going to have to go out of their way to assure their readers that they can be trusted. Because as of yesterday, we now know we've lived for almost 3.5 years with a heavily censored social media world, and a lot of people didn't really know that. It's going to, on one hand, it's very good news. On the other hand, if you needed any one thing to increase people's suspicion and lack of trust in our official institutions, this is definitely a case. So I'm glad that the information is out there. You and I have been trying to draw attention to this for a very long time. Well, now it's out in the open.
Yeah, creepy, but good. Jeffrey, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
You want to watch our special on George Washington? It's freaking awesome. Well, you can. All you have to do is become a First TV supporter. That gives you access to all of our specials on demand, and it's cake. All you have to go to is thefirsttv.com/support. Thefirsttv.com/support. Become a supporter. Enjoy learning about George Washington.